Hey, everybody.
Welcome to Trust Relations, the podcast.
I'm here with April, the founder of Trust Relations and the doyen of all things public relations.
And of course, we're joined by the wonderful Hamish, our marketing lead and expert in the space, who I like to call my marketing other half.
We're tackling some of the biggest topics in news and integrated marketing and learning from the mistakes that make headlines or sink brands.
So join us as we have a chat about what works, what doesn't, and what we have to say about all of it. All right, welcome back to Trust Relations, the podcast with our special guest co-host, Lana Marshall. Welcome, Lana. She's back.
Thanks for having me.
Just a reminder for those of you who didn't hear the last episode, Lana is our Chief Operations Officer at Trust Relations. And she is here today because we are celebrating our 4-year anniversary. So we brought her from behind the scenes where she prefers to be
Yes.
to the forefront where she is uncomfortably but being a good sport and participating.
Thank you for having me and happy 4-year anniversary to Trust Relations.
Thank you. It's very exciting. 4 years is actually a pretty big landmark. I know a lot of startups go under in the 2 or 3 year mark. So usually when they say you make it past 3 years, you're not necessarily in the clear, but you're sailing along. And I know we've definitely come a long way through a pandemic and now whatever this is, recession, not recession. It's a crazy time in the world. But that's one of your favorite sayings, Lana. What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. Yeah. I think that should be on my gravestone. What a time to be alive. But then I wouldn't be, so that wouldn't quite make sense.
Actually, I love that. It's like extra funny.
Yeah.
At least we should get you a t-shirt or a sweatshirt with that on it.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Lana, do you have any favorite moments from the last, well, you haven't been here all of the 4 years, but you've been here.
No, I've been here for about a little over half of it.
Woo!
I know, crazy.
We've been married that long?
We've been married that long.
It's amazing.
It's been a very interesting 2.5 years. Very rewarding, it has been all the things. It has felt like a lifetime and a blink of an eye at the same time.
I know.
I
do. I hope you don't say the same to your new husband, Kyle, in 2.5 years.
I hope I do. I hope that our lives are.
It's been an interesting.
Yeah. There was more to that. Yeah. But that's kind of what I like, right? What could you have learned if it was par for the course,
True.
A few things. The in-person retreat in Sedona is up there because I got to meet team members that I have known for quite some time over a screen in person, and people are taller than I thought. And, it was just so funny to see how our dynamics are almost the same, like in person, but just a different version of that. And just finding out little things that you wouldn't know just from like a Zoom call, things that surprised me about team members. And it was just a treat to be able to experience people in person like that and bond in a different way. So I would say that was really lovely. And the video that the team made me for my 2-year anniversary still to this day really warms my cold heart.
She does not have a cold heart.
No, that's an ongoing joke.
Yeah, it's funny. My biggest surprise of the retreat was how big of a personality our show producer Veronica has.
I could have guessed.
I knew she did, but I didn't know it was as big. Like I was like, it was amazing. I was so pleased.
So what are you referring to? Her amazing karaoke performance?
Yeah, I mean that started it, but that was like she came in. She flew in later than everyone else and came into karaoke.
Oh no, she made an entrance.
There was down like
yeah.
It was like
I almost feel like it was planned, but I planned her flight, so I know it wasn't planned, right? Like, she came in later, looking like amazing as she does.
I know.
And just like shut that karaoke bar down, like who could have done better, honestly.
Nobody. No.
So all hail Veronica.
Yeah,
Honestly.
exactly.
Yeah. Big fan, big fan.
Yes, our Veronica, as we're talking about her in the chat, because the audience can't see this, is saying, "Oh my God, no, ha ha ha, please, ha ha, I'm so red, I'm so red, R.I.P. help." Oh God, amazing. Okay, so now that we've embarrassed everyone, shall we move on to agency essentials?
Yes, I would love to.
Okay, so today we're talking about how can agencies and other companies develop a considerate culture, which is something that I don't know if we've quite coined it, but I don't think it's a widely used term, but it's one that really describes, I think, the culture here at Trust Relations. And so Lana actually recently did an article about this for Authority Magazine about how do you actually give constructive feedback for internal teams in a kind and caring way that's, still true to a considerate culture. Because what I see her do so well is that when she gives this feedback, she's always doing it to make everyone, including the person getting the feedback, better, and they know it. And so it's received with a spirit of kindness and acceptance rather than defensiveness because of the way that she approaches it. So she's one of the most brilliant people I've ever seen do this. So I would love to hear from Lana herself how in the hell she does this.
Very kind of you. I think that having harder conversations, with feedback being one of them, right, it's difficult for everyone. And I really think that I only became somewhat good at this because of
Very good at
the mentors that I had before I joined this agency, where a lot of the kind of feedback that they gave to me was structured in a way of not, hey, you were wrong. Why would you do something like this? Which I'm sure that has happened to other people, right? But like, it was never structured in that way. It was more so, let's look at what happened and tell me what led you to make this choice. I want to know, I want to hear that, because I think it'll help me to better frame where I'm coming from with this feedback for this advice for next time. If I really am listening to where you came from and why you decided to do something the way that you did. And I think that part is oftentimes missing. It's oftentimes like, I saw this mistake and now I'm just going to tell you why you were wrong and what you should do instead next time. And oftentimes when you manage people that way or talk to people in that way, they don't really feel like you care about them and their journey and what led them there, because very rarely is someone doing something just because they wanted to screw something up. Like, I would say 9 times out of 10, that was not their goal,
1 time out of 10 people actually want to screw
No,
something up.
not yeah, sometimes. And I wouldn't sometimes that happens, for
it does happen.
A weird outlier example, but the majority of the time, people are just doing their best. When you look at it like that, you're able to kind of offer advice or feedback, etc., with more compassion, because you're not looking at it like, oh my God, this person did something that inconvenienced me and then made me have to do XYZ thing, right? You then are looking at it more so in the sense that they're human. They made the choice that they thought was best at the time. So what can I now come in and share with them to help them be set up for success, to make a different, hopefully better choice in the future to prevent XYZ thing from happening again, bad situation from happening again. So I think you do it in that way, people are more open to hearing advice or feedback, because they know you're not doing it to hurt their feelings, you're doing it to stop them from having to have a conversation with you about it again. And to stop other bad situations from happening. So I would say that's at the core of the way that I, give feedback.
One, it's really interesting because that approach actually builds more trust with people because they know that you're candid. And I think we've all had experiences in life and probably in agencies where you don't really feel like you know where you stand with people, and you feel like you sometimes find out from someone else through the grapevine that someone isn't happy with your work or with you, but nobody told you to your face. And so then it just creates this whole culture of mistrust because you don't know at any point if somebody is talking bad about you behind your back. And I think that's something that this approach really, I can't say necessarily abolishes completely, because obviously, people get paranoid and things, but I think doing this it cuts down on that by at least 99%, right? Like
A lot,
it's
yeah.
a lot. People feel more comfortable in the end because they know if there's an issue that you're going to come to them. And the same with Lana, right? Like I know for a fact if Lana's frustrated with something, she'll let me know because she's always going to say, "Hey, let's do this better. Hey, didn't love how this went. Hey," and
Yeah,
it helps me
because
feel
yeah,
like
that
I know
you're getting at me at face value.
I'm getting you at face value. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I do know exactly what you mean. It's like, am I sensing a tone? Because they're saying it's fine, but I know it's probably not fine. That communication is really helpful in any context in life. I think in your personal relationships, your professional, etc.
Mhm.
Is if you feel something isn't working and you don't tell someone and find a way to tell it to them in a way that will land to then get you to a better place, you have no one to blame but yourself if it blows up in your face, right? Because you didn't take the responsibility for yourself to try to fix it. And so like there is a little bit of self-awareness as well and responsibility that you have to take in that situation as well. Like I can't just sit in discomfort or unhappiness, etc. Like I need to then try to do what I can do to fix the thing myself. And hopefully the other person is then on board too. So
Mhm.
communication is key.
Yeah. I have a theory on this actually, which I've pontificated
Oh,
on
I
with
want
Laura.
to hear it.
I feel like a lot of times people get into PR because they struggle with advocating for themselves or speaking up or communicating on behalf of themselves, but are very good at doing it for other people. So it's
Mm,
sort of a way of outsourcing something that, you're not able to fully take on for yourself, but can do really well for other people. And
mm,
that's been my experience is a lot of people, they're very intuitive. They know how to read you. They
mhm.
understand how to communicate what you're feeling. But when it comes to themselves, it can be really tricky.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to kind of turn all of that on its head because I think a lot of people that are attracted to this industry in general are coming from that other place that isn't naturally what Lana's describing, right? Which is ironically a better form of communication. So it's like we're really good communicators when it comes to other people, but not ourselves.
Mhm. Is that what attracted you to PR?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Because I like to advocate for other people.
mhm.
I don't advocate for
I
myself.
I would say like that's along the same vein as why I went into PR, but really for me it was wanting to help other people feel heard and seen,
Hmm.
I think, and in that way that it is along the same vein, right? It's like
Very
how can I
similar.
help someone to put forth the best version of themselves, like if that was my clients or the teams that I
Hmm.
was on, etc. So
For
yeah.
sure. See, my theory holds up with a market research focus group of one. All right, write in if you agree. So, Lana, any other tips or advice that you want to offer to people about, how you can go about sharing constructive feedback? Move
Something
on.
just like very logistical is making sure to provide feedback or have a conversation around feedback in real time. So like don't wait 2 weeks, don't wait a month, don't,
Hmm.
try to do it as close to the thing as possible because then you're able to kind of dissect everything about the situation because it's all the details are fresh. That person can kind of contextualize what we're talking about, etc., and do it in a place that is quiet, private, etc., whether that's like an in-person place or if you're in a Zoom room, make sure that there aren't any distractions around, etc.,
Hmm.
because you really want to make sure that that person is present and with you. So no
Hmm.
multitasking, no, come prepared, come with what you want to share with that person. Um, be open to being wrong. I think that that's like another thing that
That's good
not
advice.
often talked about when we're talking about feedback. Oftentimes, like, it's assumed that the person giving feedback is right. and they have the full story, and that oftentimes is not true. Is not true.
Yeah.
You as a person that's giving feedback, if you're, a manager, or me, or anyone in an organization, sometimes you're only getting a very small piece of that puzzle. So really doing your due diligence of understanding all of the things that happen to lead us to this particular situation is really, really important. Being open to potentially having a wrong interpretation of the thing is really important too. And so I think that is something to kind of take into consideration, is like sometimes your how you see things isn't exactly correct, and that the feedback might need to be adjusted, or there's more things that need to be talked about, more changes. Maybe it's infrastructurally there's a problem that needs to be fixed because it's making the mistake harder to make in the future. Like there are other things that could potentially be at play. So like being open as the person providing feedback to adjust is really important too.
That's interesting, because that's one of the 13 core ways to build trust according to Stephen Covey and the speed of trust.
Hey, Stephen,
listen first. He says listen first, because if you listen first before you talk, it might completely change what you were going to say.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what you're saying. If you come and you say, hey, how do you think this went? Which I know is one of your questions, right? That you typically ask if it's like, you're not sure it went well, but you want to see how they thought it went. And then you ask, right? And are there other kind of leading questions like that you use frequently that people could benefit from?
I do oftentimes ask that question first. I genuinely want to know how you got to the decision that you got to, whether it was objectively a good one, or objectively led us to an uncomfortable situation, etc. Like I genuinely want to know, because it better allows me to give feedback and frame things in a certain way that is most helpful to you. When you just give cookie cutter advice, it's not going to be helpful to a person if it just doesn't apply. So I truly do, when I ask that question, I am listening, because I really want to know if what I plan to come say, is that even relevant to this situation? If it's not, how can I adjust as a person that is mentoring you, that is giving you advice, to provide you with something of value, not something that, you're just another meeting, and no one is just another meeting for me.
No.
So
no, nor should they be.
Yeah.
For anybody. But cool. Well, anything else you want to add before we move on to the next segment? Also, Lana's article will be in the show notes. So anybody who wants to see her full thoughts on all of this, please go to the show notes and you can see her article.
I think we covered it.
Cool. Okay, so our next segment is Marketing Conundrum. And today we are talking about how to go about managing client expectations in an industry like integrated communications, where things change often and people are emotionally invested. So this is especially true with complicated and multi-part campaigns, where it's important to be able to have those frank conversations with clients about what's going to work, what's not going to work, what will work if they have XYZ in place, etc. And this is actually something a lot of agency owners can attest to. Something you run into a lot is expectation setting with prospects.
Yes.
Which I would argue, probably because it's me in those shoes, but is the hardest, because you're trying to simultaneously secure a new client and sell them on something without, selling them snake oil or a false bill of goods or whatever, right? And that's, I think, once you have a client, it's still hard to set expectations, but trying to do both is the ultimate capoeira dance.
It is such an art, because if you sell someone something that isn't, maybe it's what they want to hear, but it's not possible with perhaps what stage of the business they're in, et cetera, et cetera. Like one day they will get there, but at this moment, the stage that they're in as a company, what they're hoping for maybe isn't possible. It is arguably better to communicate that at that moment than later, when they've already
made money and got frustrated.
Yeah. and they're angry, and now there's a contract, all of those things. Like, it's such a beautiful balance. And I think with time, April, you've gone into your own stride of being able to do that. And it really sets up the team for success later, right? Because you're not promising the world when the reality of the business is that it's only part of the world. And one day it will be the world, but it just isn't right now.
Yeah, it's funny, just this morning I had a prospect who really wanted regional coverage for something, and it sort of makes sense for them, but only if they have case studies relevant to those regional markets.
Yeah.
And so I was able to say, hey, I love this. I completely understand why you are focused on the strategy. That said, we would need case studies to be able to demonstrate in those key markets. Did you have those? Or if not, can we make that a priority as part of the campaign that will produce those?
Yeah.
So you have them. And in the meantime, I think we should try to get national trade coverage. You should still take that then and do a targeted digital marketing campaign with those placements. So let's say we get you in XYZ trade, then take that trade media placement and then go advertise it to that niche market in those regions. Right. So that's
So
still a
what
way
is
of
possible
using
now, and then what's possible now? How do we leverage
exactly
to get you there? Like, the strategy is the same. Like, we all want to get to the same goal, but what is actually possible with where you are? And like, oftentimes, if it's the right client, I think, and one that is a true partner to you, they see that as advice that is coming from a true partner, right? Not someone that's
right.
just, yeah, sure, just for the retainer, and then they sign and then they don't get that anyway. So
yeah, no, he really appreciated it. He
yeah,
said, I didn't mean to sound like I only want this one thing. That's just what I think would be most strategic, but I'm
yeah,
open to you. So I was like, oh,
yeah,
wow, this is, it's really
yeah,
nice feedback. So
yeah.
if you bring somebody in, you have a frank conversation up front. So you level set expectations. Then when you bring in the client, they're less likely to leave, which means you aren't constantly replacing and doing the
Mhm.
churn and burn with clients too, which I know a lot
Exactly.
of agencies are famous for. So
Yeah.
we're trying hard not to do that. But
And
yeah, I
or
think
telling them maybe it's just not the right time for PR, which is heartbreaking from the sense that you want to work with them, but if it's not helpful to their business, that is something that I know that you've done too.
I
And
have done that. And actually I mean another prospect that I'm talking to who's in the middle of trying to evaluate which thing he can spend the money on next because he's still in startup mode.
yeah,
And I actually said to him, I said, just call me when you've evaluated all your proposals. I will actually tell you. I'll sit down with you and I'll look at it and say, is PR the best use of your budget or should we do digital marketing? I will actually tell you.
yeah,
So, and it's also the reason in part that I've brought in some of these other pieces of the marketing mix into trust relations slowly so that we can actually handle what I think needs to be done first, whether it's a new logo, new brand, a new website, new messaging, new positioning, whatever, all those things need to get handled before we can actually jump into media relations.
Can you say a little bit more about why that is the case? Like, why someone would need all of those things before PR? I think it might be, I don't know if you've talked about it before,
No,
but
we haven't actually. It's a really good question, Lana. So sometimes I've seen prospects come through the door, not even just at this agency, but others,
mhm,
and they think that their investor deck and their website are prime time, ready for grand reveal. But if we were to pitch the press, let's say what they really want is the Wall Street Journal or something like that. If the Wall Street Journal would see either of those assets, they wouldn't be taken seriously.
mhm,
And it's something where, yes, we can pitch the press, but then you've invested your time in us making a first introduction, a first impression to one of the most important reporters of your life cycle as a company, and you didn't put your best foot forward.
mhm.
And it's very damaging because they always say you never get a second chance to make a first impression.
Yeah.
So if we make those first impressions on your behalf and you don't look the part that you want to or that you're trying to portray or trying to project, then it's going to be not only a waste of money but a potential missed opportunity.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty serious.
Yeah. And to add on to that, we also do the trust analysis where we're kind of reevaluating the business and kind of what you should and want to put forward. And oftentimes that means a really big overhaul on the existing messaging, branding, etc. on your website. And so if all of those things don't happen first, and then you do reach out to Wall Street Journal or, whoever your top outlet is, they're going to get a different sense of the business than you intend. So even if it looks great, the website looks great or whatever, but if the messaging is outdated, you're also not putting your best foot forward either. So I think it's really, really smart, and something that a lot of PR agencies don't offer is like, they're just like, okay, can I work with this client as they are? And oftentimes it's a little bit more of a heavy lift on the branding side to make sure that they are really ready to have PR amplify their message, So I think it is really, really smart that maybe it's, a little extra time, but when the time is invested, it's invested in a place that is going to show a lot of return later on.
Agreed. Yeah, the other thing I sometimes run into with prospects is that what they really need right now is sales. In which case I tell them, actually, PR, if they're living kind of, I don't want to say paycheck to paycheck, but the company version of that, if their brand version of that, if they are living month to month and they need every single dollar that they spend to come back to them in the following month, or the following month or two, then I actually tell them PR is not a great fit yet. And in those cases, typically doing, social media and especially digital marketing and advertising is the better way to go, because they're going to see a return faster. Because they're actually going to be able, okay, I spent this money on Facebook advertising and I got this many sales. So SEO and PR are the two things in marketing that I tell them have a much longer runway, where you actually, that's where you, when you're big enough that you can sustain that kind of a spend without it coming back to you within 6 months to a year, then you're ready. So I also kind of help steer them along those lines as well. But yeah, it's pretty tricky. Any other tips, Lana, that you have for navigating things like unrealistic KPIs, timelines, etc., that have come up on the client side?
Yeah, I think a lot of how we've kind of navigated around that is to really position any advice or managing any expectations with the acknowledgement that our goal is the same. So, my goal for you is the same. I want you to get into XYZ thing, or I want this to happen for you too. But the way to do it is with these tactics. And oftentimes when you let people know that your goal is the same, I think this is true on the team side too. It's like, if the goal is the same, maybe it is not quite going the way that you envision in your mind, but because I have experience in this industry, et cetera, I'm letting you know the way to best get to this goal, the way that we're going to get there together is by doing these things. And so let's try it together. If it doesn't work, we will continue to check in with each other and we'll pivot. Let's give this a go, because I've seen it done time and time again. And I too want us to get to the same place. We're in this together. So when you kind of position it in that way, it becomes less of an argument and more of a, how do we strategize together as a team? Because that's essentially what we do to our clients.
For sure. Yeah. And just to add to that, I think I've had a lot of luck with the listen first piece that Lana was talking about before. If you ask them what they're frustrated about and listen, and then say back to them what you heard them say, and then get into Lana's sort of, advice about, okay, this is what I think we should do to pivot. I want the same thing, right? I think it's a really great way of helping them vent and feel heard. And then once they feel heard, then they can calm down. Because a lot of times, back to the initial question about people being emotionally invested, when people are emotionally heated, it means that they don't feel heard yet. And so they need to feel heard before any progress can be made. Lana, what was your famous line from one client where we had a difficult conversation? You said something like, we can all want a lot of things. But it doesn't make it so. What did you, what's the line?
It was something like he really wanted a feature in like a top tier outlet with a product that had been launched like 2 or 3 years ago.
With nothing, with no new angles.
With no new angle, there was no change,
there was
no
no funding.
Nothing had changed about it. He just decided that that was the thing that needed to be featured. It hadn't even been really used. There were no cases. There was really no way to go about making this really newsworthy. And it was like he wanted like a top tier. He did not want,
He wanted a feature too, like a feature in TechCrunch
it was
or
like,
something.
And I was and I just had to tell him like it's a balance between, keeping the client happy and keeping them rooted in reality. So
exactly. Amazing. Well, Lana, anything you want to add before we get to our closing? Sorry,
no, I think we covered it. That was a great conversation. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much for listeners. Please know that you can catch the show wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And remember, subscribe, rate, and share the show to keep this content coming your way. Also, we really appreciate you joining in for our part 2 of our anniversary episodes. And we're going to miss you already.
Happy anniversary, April. And trust
Thank you. You too, Lana, and Trust Relations, and everyone here. Bye, everybody.
Bye.